27. The Eucharistic Enigma. Pagan echoes, egregores, and the rewiring of the Christ story. Behind every sacred ritual is a story, and behind every story is a power that seeks to be remembered. The Eucharist, that central act of Christian devotion, has for centuries been presented as the purest communion between humanity and the divine, bread and wine transformed into the body and blood of Christ. To the faithful, it is grace itself made tangible. But to the historian, the anthropologist, and the esotericist, the Eucharist also bears the unmistakable fingerprints of much older rites, and perhaps the shadow of a different kind of magic. This is not to diminish the devotion of those who take the sacrament, nor to mock the sincerity of their faith. Most who kneel at the altar have no knowledge of its possible origins beyond the gospel accounts, nor would they suspect the ancient currents that may still flow beneath it. And yet, when we trace the shape of this ritual backward in time, we find that it does not emerge in a vacuum. It echoes. The pattern is older than Christianity. In the mystery cults of the Mediterranean, initiates drank wine and ate bread as the god's blood and body. Mithras, Osiris, Dionysus, each a dying and rising figure whose death fed life back to the world. In Celtic lands, warriors partook of the sacred animal's flesh, believing they absorbed its divine potency. In Egypt, devotees of Osiris consumed cakes shaped in his image. The symbolism was clear. To eat the god was to merge with the god, to bind one's life to his fate. When the early Jesus movement emerged in the 1st century, it was still intimately tied to Jewish mysticism, to the prophetic voice of Yeshua, a reformer who spoke of inner transformation and direct access to the divine without temple or priest. But within decades, the teachings began to absorb the language, imagery, and sacramental structures of the surrounding Hellenistic world. By the time the faith reached the Roman elite, it carried a form of the sacred meal that would have been entirely familiar to initiates of the older cults. The Eucharist was not an alien ritual to them. It was a rebranded one. The transformation accelerated in 325 CE at the Council of Nicaea. Under Constantine's rule, Christianity became an imperial faith. Doctrine was standardized, feasts aligned with the pagan calendar, temples repurposed, and the Mass became the beating heart of the new religion. From then on, the bread and wine were not merely symbols. They were the actualized body and blood of Christ, offered to millions. A ritual once intimate became a synchronized act of devotion across continents. From an esoteric perspective, such synchronization is not merely symbolic, it is energetic. Every week, at the same hour in countless churches, vast numbers of people visualize and affirm the same archetype: Christ as divine sacrifice, whose body and blood must be consumed to sustain the soul. Over centuries, the repetition of this imagery, spoken in the charged space of ritual, has the power to create an egregore, a collective thought form fed by the emotional, mental, and spiritual focus of its believers. If the Christ of the Eucharist is the same as the historical Yeshua, then this egregore may be nothing more than the amplified presence of his living spirit, a way for humanity to stay connected to his light. But if, as some Gnostics and mystics have suggested, the institutional church created a composite figure, merging the prophet with pre-existing divine archetypes and political necessities, then the being sustained in this ritual might not be Yeshua at all. It might be something else entirely. This is where the theory grows darker. In occult terms, an egregore need not be malicious to act independently of its source. But if the form worshipped as Jesus Christ was engineered to centralize spiritual power within the Church, then the Eucharist could function as a mass energy harvesting ritual, a siphoning of human devotion, not toward the unmediated divine, but toward an entity bound to an institution. In this frame, the body and blood become not just sacraments, but conduits, not just remembrance, but reinforcement of the egregore's hold. There are unsettling hints in stone and symbol. Medieval churches sometimes incorporate horned figures in their carvings, often dismissed as folklore or satanic warnings. Yet to the eye trained in Celtic iconography, some of these figures bear a striking resemblance to Cernunnos, the horned god, a deity of cycles, fertility, and sovereignty, long venerated in pre-Christian Europe. Was this survival of art merely aesthetic? Or was it a quiet signal from those who knew the old currents still flowed beneath the new rites? Within the framework of the Cain theory, the idea of an ancient lineage guarding forbidden knowledge through coded ritual, this layering makes sense. Take a prophet of liberation, Yeshua, reframe him through syncretic myth, Jesus Christ. Embed his story in the familiar forms of older God-eating rites, and you have a ritual that can bind entire civilizations to an energetic system while convincing them it is the only path to salvation. Whether one sees this as deliberate spiritual conquest or as an unconscious archetypal inheritance, the effect is the same. Humanity's longing for union with the divine is mediated through an image shaped by forces it does not see. Perhaps the most haunting possibility is that the original Yeshua's message still flickers beneath this structure, like a candle behind a mask, but the mask has become the focus of worship. If so, then the Eucharist, beautiful and sacred to so many, may also be the greatest act of spiritual misdirection in history, a ritual that both points toward the light and diverts it. And yet, if such a system can be built, it can also be undone. If the egregore of Jesus is a construction, it is still fed by the intent of the people. Redirect the intent, reframe the vision, and the energy can be reclaimed, not for an institution, but for the divine source from which Yeshua drew his own light. The question is not whether the Eucharist is pagan or Christian, pure or corrupted. The question is, who or what is being fed when we lift the bread and wine to our lips?